tumbling through 1,000 centuries. You don't know where you land. It's so dark in mythology. Treasures of history to be found. Hear the legends of time. All the handiworks remain. Only the dream away. Orion, Orion,
Season 4 ran from the 10th of September 1966 to the 1st of July 1967. It introduced the Second Doctor and Classic Who's longest-running companion. Yes, it's not Sarah Jane. Basically, Year 4 was a very important year of change. The first story is the four-part The Smugglers, a historical set in 17th century Cornwall. Now, for people who don't know, Cornwall is a bit like the UK's Florida. Not in the people are often fucking nuts kind of way, but in there's lots of water, it's warmer than most of the country, and they used to have pirates kind of way. I suppose it was good of them to open with something so traditional and, for want of a couple of better words, boring and forgettable. It's a historical paint by numbers. But they do talk about Captain Avery, who later turned up in the equally forgettable Curse of the Black Spot. Next is one of the most important stories in the show's history. The 10th Planet is a four-parter and does double duty, introducing the Cybermen and killing off the First Doctor. First off, about the Cybermen, I really like this slightly silly-looking version of them. Much less robotic than the later ones, they're pretty much how the Borg might have looked if they were introduced in classic Star Trek. The Cybermen were inspired by things like heart transplants, and the logic of their appearance is that they've had robotic parts surgically added to them. So that's basically surgical gauze on their faces, and the robotic parts are more like mobile life support systems. So it's one of those designs that looks silly, but it works logically. Now on to the regeneration. The Doctor does not go down in a blaze of glory. He survives the battle, but his body wears out in the closing minutes of the story. The only surviving pieces of the final episode are the regeneration itself. The kids' show Blue Peter borrowed episode 4 from the archives to do a bit on the regeneration years later, and they lost it. So the only bits we still have are what they showed in that episode. In the 6-part Power of the Daleks, we finally got a real look at the new Doctor. Younger, happier, more mischievous, and 20% more awesome. I make no bones about it. He's my favourite. It's the future, and on the planet Vulcan, the locals have found 2 inanimate Daleks in a crashed rocket, and against the Doctor's warnings decide to reanimate them. Jonathan Archer was right. The fucking Vulcans don't listen to anyone. This episode is basically Victory of the Daleks done right. They manipulate people, they claim to be friendly, and they serve people, but when they get into a position of power, they fuck shit up. However, this is different from Victory in several important ways. 1. It was made decades before. 2. The Doctor wears this hat. And 3. Most importantly, this isn't shit. If I had to choose 5 missing stories to have back, this is another one. The Highlanders is the final pure historical for nearly 20 years, and it's set in the aftermath of the Battle of Culloden, and introduces the first of what I'd say are the iconic Classic Who companions. Ones which entered the public consciousness either because they really clicked, or because they hung around for a very long time. He's the only iconic male companion, he appeared in more episodes than any other companion, and even appeared in more episodes than about half the Doctors. He is Jamie motherfucking McCrimmon.
O flower of Scotland, when will we see your like again?
Jamie was a piper in the defeated Jacobite forces at Culloden, facing either execution or transport to a colony if he was captured. But he teamed up with the TARDIS crew and ended up staying for a long time. Interestingly, he was not supposed to be a companion. They even filmed a goodbye scene before they hastily rewrote the ending, brought him back in and reshot. Jamie is happy, loyal, funny, and a little bit stupid, but that could mostly be ignorance. But even on top of that, he's a bit happily thick. Honestly, he's like the Doctor's friendly, human-shaped sheepdog in a kilt. He and the Second Doctor are brilliant together. Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines knew each other in real life, and their chemistry just bled out into the show. They would come up with skits and ad-libs to do together. In some ways, they used the show as an excuse to improvise and generally mess about. They even deliberately tried to make it look like the Doctor and Jamie were fucking, as much as they could in a mid-60s TV show. They nearly joined the show together, and they left together. Ben and Polly didn't come out of this very well. The character of Jamie was kind of forced on them. and the scripts were very quickly rewritten, so they each lost a lot of lines, and neither of them were as popular as Jamie. Honestly, it's a bit like how Saved by the Bell was originally about a teacher called Miss Bliss, and the kids were side characters who were so popular they just took over. So what I'm saying is that their days were numbered. It's a pity. As much as I love Jamie, they were good too. The next story is The Underwater Menace. It's 4 episodes long, and it's the first completely embarrassing story of this era. And more importantly, it's the first time the show deals with Atlantis. You want to know how many contradictory ways Classic Who dealt with the destruction of Atlantis? 3 times. And 2 of them happened within a season of each other. That's later on, though. This story features fish people, one of the companions almost being turned into a fish person, and the show's first ridiculously insane scientist villain, who wants to destroy everything for the hell of it. And the show's first piece of transcendently hammy acting, in the same guy. Here's a taste. If I showed you any more, the actor might chew through your walls, right through the screen, even though he's long dead.
Kill those 2 men! Nothing in the world can stop me now!
That's Professor Zaroff. Personally, I'm thinking that he hasn't been quite the same since that incident with Planet Mongo. Because this is so ridiculous, I'm going to make an announcement. If the last 2 episodes of this are found, or they're animated, I will do a classic Twatty Who review on this story, very soon after the DVD is released. Next we have the Moonbase and the return of the Cybermen, who are back with a much more traditional look. How the Cybermen look changed a bit in most of their appearances, but from now on they're pretty much as most people remember them. Metal on the outside, squishy on the inside. The story is 4 episodes long and it's set on a moonbase in the year 2070. The Cybermen have unleashed an epidemic as a precursor to their assault. It's a base under siege story. These are very common in the Second Doctor era. TARDIS crew and red shirts are in a place and evil monsters are on the outside attacking. Then death, 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 death. The next story is the Macra Terror, and it's one of those story concepts that just wouldn't be done in New Who. More's the fucking pity. New Who's crazy concepts are shit like space Titanic disaster fraud, or large green thing absorbs nerds. What I'm saying is that when it comes to crazy concepts, they have very little imagination. The Macra Terror is about evil giant crabs that brainwash people into mining the gas that the Macra need to survive but is fatal to humans. The Macra themselves turned up in the story Gridlock, and until the Great Intelligence reappeared in the Snowman, it was the longest wait for an alien to come back. Around 40 years. In my introduction I commented about how New Who basically likes to reinvent, tweak and repackage classic monsters with new names. But what happened with the Macra between this and Gridlock is the exact opposite. They took a random monster in Gridlock and made it the Macra for no reason whatsoever. In the Macra Terror they could hold a human in one of their claws, they were covered in hairs, and they were extremely intelligent. In Gridlock they were a fuckload bigger, had no hairs, and were about as stupid as an actual crab. Now there's a huge time difference between the 2 appearances in universe, and normally I'd be okay with them showing the effects of evolution, but why is this the only time it's been done? Humans are superficially the same regardless of the time period they're in. Oh wait, sorry, in Utopia they got tattoos and sharp teeth. I'll shut up. Honestly, I think they just made them the Macra in Gridlock to make Classic Who fans squee. Alas, everyone who knew who the Macra were also likely to know that the Macra in Gridlock bear about as much resemblance to the Macra from the Macra Terror as the TARDIS bears to a cheese sandwich. Anyway, the Macra Terror. Fucking weird and fucking great. It's a happy fascist world kept in place via hypnosis and people being artificial. It's basically the Happiness Patrol, but better. And with giant crabs. If I could have 5 stories back, I want this one. So on to the Faceless Ones, and finally Ben and Polly's numbers are up. The TARDIS lands in the 1960s and they're going home. They're both gone after the 2nd episode, but unlike Dodo, they were able to record a goodbye scene which was stuck at the end of the story. The Faceless Ones is set primarily around Gatwick Airport. The chameleons are aliens who have lost their identities in a massive explosion, and so need to steal other people's identities to survive. The story is 6 episodes long, and it doesn't quite explain how a race can lose their identities in an explosion, and why they'll die without them, or how stealing other people's can help. But what the hey, it's got characters called Blade and Pointo. It doesn't need to explain anything. Anyway, and we're on to the last story of the season. Power of the Daleks shared elements with Victory of the Daleks, and Evil of the Daleks shares elements with Daleks in Manhattan. Poor Season 4. Your good Dalek stories are forever being cannibalized by bad New Who. Evil of the Daleks introduces us to Victoria, the new companion. Quite aptly for her name, she's a Victorian and one of the youngest people ever to travel with the Doctor. She's in her mid-teens and joins up when she's orphaned by the Daleks. The evil Daleks. Like I said, this shares ideas with Daleks in Manhattan. The Daleks force the Doctor to create a new type of Dalek by adding humanity to them in the hope that it'll make them invincible. This all leads to what was supposed to be the Daleks' last battle, as the human Daleks battled the regular Daleks in a fight so epic it had to be done with models. The Daleks apparently being wiped out and later coming back was so common in the Russell T Davies era that it was met with sighs of, "Really? You expect us to buy that? Again?" But with this, it was a genuine surprise, partly because it was really supposed to be their end. They were so successful that Terry Nation was trying to get a TV show off the ground starring them. The fact that he never managed it is the only reason they came back. Season 4 is a solid season and better than Season 3. It's got the dull, the smugglers, the insane, the Underwater Menace, and the way too long, the Faceless Ones, but it's also got the second Doctor and Jamie, the Macra Terror, and two of the best Dalek stories in the show's history. All in all, it's easily above average. Join me next time for Season 5, when we'll meet the Great Intelligence and the Ice Warriors. We'll have the first season without the Daleks, and we'll get to look at the two stories that were recently returned to the BBC.